What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Steve's Project Car Garage. My name is Steve. I'm going to be working again on the Spitfire today. Going to try to get this, temporary dash set up that I posted about on Instagram a few days ago. So grab yourself a cup of ginger juice and stick around. Well, as you can tell, I'm back in the sweatshirt, which means here in Central Florida that we're chilly again. So back into the mid-50s. It's going to be a little bit of a rainy couple of days. So good opportunity to spend some time out here in the garage. So what I'm going to plan on doing is just setting up a couple of gauges to be able to get a good read on the engine itself. I'm going to have to wire in a push button start, toggle switch for the power, and of course, wire up the temperature and then also wire up the fans. So that's kind of what my plan is, and if everything goes well, I'm going to go ahead and throw some oil into this guy and then give it a couple of bumps just to make sure everything turns nicely. And then, in another video, we should be getting ready to start this guy. I do have to install the exhaust though still, but that shouldn't take me much more than an hour or so. So anyways, let me go ahead and show you what we're working with, and let's get started. All right, so let me give you a little bit of a tour of what I've kind of got, brewing here. So this is the old temporary dash that I built years ago. And so I just stuffed a couple of gauges in it, and that's what we're going to use. We got gauges that won't be used, such as fuel and amps and volts. I might hook up the voltmeter, but we're definitely going to be using temp and oil pressure. The oil pressure gauge is off of a TR4 I got from Kyle. These are the original speedometer and tachometer. And then over here, I've got just an on-off toggle switch to, turn everything on. And then I just got a push button here to go ahead and start it. So what I'm going to end up doing is, I think, going to get a little, seat or something to put the battery on. Battery will sit here. The positive coming off of the battery, going to the starter solenoid. I'll have power coming off the starter solenoid to a small fuse box that I've got over there that I can just branch off of easily. Do I need a fuse box for this? No. Do I have one? And it's easy and it's going to help me split up the power? Absolutely. So we'll have power going from this on over to the ignition coil. Ignition coil obviously will be plugged in like this into the Dizzy. Dizzy's connected in here as well. And then I got a negative battery terminal here for my ground. So once I have that all cut up or connected, I'm going to get a common ground point that I'll create. I maybe just use a bolt or something that I'll put into here, into the wood, and then I'll just tie it all together with wire. So that way I just have all the grounds going to one spot, which will then eventually tap into the negative terminal on the battery. So that's kind of the basic gist of it. Now I just got to figure out how to wire it up and make it all work. And I realized that because I did the alternator conversion, I do not have a cable for the alternator. So I got this one here for the starter sitting here, but I will actually need to go ahead and get a cable for that. So that kind of puts a wrench into my works. So I'm going to jump on and get a cable ordered up, probably do like a 3-foot cable, similar to what I'm using here for the ground. I got to find out what gauge this was. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah. And then that, of course, this positive will run over to the positive on the starter solenoid. So yeah, that's kind of what I've got planned out for the moment. And let's just see what we can make happen. All right, so here's kind of what I've done so far. This is the little fuse box I was talking about, and you can just pretty much run a hot right here. And then you can have all your, accessories run off of this. I also thought about maybe just using this as my common ground port. I don't know. Still thinking on that. I went ahead and I wired up the temperature probe. Got that hooked up over here. I'll have to run power. And then I got to figure out, again, a ground. Because I have to have a ground off of this. And I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, the ground just comes off of the post here. I'll have to double check on that. And yeah. I need to order this. Well, actually, I ordered it already. I ordered this cable. That's going to go from her on over to here. And then I think I'm going to probably run the power off of one of these spades to go on over to this guy if I do use that as my power. Still a little bit of thinking, fiddling around with that. Really, the only thing I need power for is going to be the coil, and then I'm going to need power for the gauge. Outside of that, everything else is really kind of independent of power. It doesn't really need power. So I might be overcomplicating this, but I will have to go ahead and run a signal cable from the push button starter and the switch over here. So I don't know. I still got some more fiddling around to do, but this is kind of what I'm figuring out. It's slow, but maybe it'll work. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, let me check in with you in a little bit. All right, so this is super, super rudimentary. I'm warning you. No shock. Don't yell at me in the comments. I don't know what I'm doing. But basic principles here. All right. Let me show you. So we have power running from the battery to the starter solenoid. Off the starter solenoid, I've got a line of power running on over to this small fuse box. Off this fuse box, I have a line running to provide power to my temperature gauge. And I have a line providing power to this push start, which is then running power over to the solenoid. Now, check this out. If I turn this on, I have acknowledgement of electricity, and you hear that? That means my starter solenoid is engaging. So, at that moment, at that point, I should be able to go ahead and fire up the starter. Now, I still need to run power, excuse me, over here to the coil. I can run that off of another one of these lines over here. Or I guess I could even theoretically just run that power off of the positive here. Get power to the coil, but the nice thing is if I run it over here, if I have an emergency, I can kill this, boom, car's off. And then I lastly have to look at my wiring and wire up the fans, because I don't want to run this as a test without those fans going to help cool the system down. In principle, this should work. We've got a ground, we've got power. It's pretty basic. And in fact, it's very basic. My electrical skills aren't that great, but this is what I'm doing with an $8 coil of wire and what I had kicking around. I'm sure I could come up with something a lot fancier if I wanted to go out and spend a ton of money. Fun fact also, this is a battery from 2017. I thought that this thing would be completely dead. I'm not going to be running this in the car, but I think this will work just fine for what I'm trying to do here. I've had the trickle charger running on it. I'm getting about 12 volts on it. It's not what I'm looking for the greatest, so I may not get a ton of cranks out of it, but I don't know. We'll see. Worst case, I can always go grab a battery out of one of the other cars. But that's where we're going to end it off for the night. I'm going to go ahead and cut you all out, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. Check to you soon. All right, slight update on things. So it's been a couple of days since I was recording last, and I got some thicker wire. This is like a 12 gauge wire, I believe. And I have now wired up the ignition coil here. Got that coming off of a fuse, so that way I can easily kill it right here if I need to. I can stop the ignition, put on some wire speeds and some better parts to kind of just keep everything wired up nicely. So that's kind of that. What the next thing to do, though, is finish wiring up the fans, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, so let me show you what I've been working on. So I've been working on the fans, getting the fans installed. And that's been a bit of a process in trying to figure out a few things. So one of the things I had to figure out was a good grounding spot for the fans. That's what this wire is. I did try to ground it to the, or ground it. I guess ground it. I tried to ground it to the frame for the radiator support. And I think my paint's just too thick in places and I just can't get a good ground. Which is okay, frankly, because I think that I would rather just have a common grounding point somewhere else. So I ran a wire and thinking that I would be able to put a ground up here. Not a good ground. That does not go to ground. So for temporary purposes, just for kind of checking it, I just kind of, hit a wire on here to to ground it, and that checked that worked. So that's that. Power. So the power comes off of the fans, and that's what these two long red wires are. And I did these long purposely for when I actually go to do the full wiring on the car itself. So I just got to kind of dress those for the temporary testing purposes, but you get the idea. So that runs over to these the blue and green wire, which then goes to a 30 amp fuse, which then goes into the relay. The relay is grounded also. Relay gets power, and also power goes to the thermostat here, which I just kind of temporarily mounted. I'm not sure I like that spot, so I may have to find a different location, but this allows me to control the temperature at which the fans turn on. So with that all being put together, I can make it work. So let me show you. All right, there we go. We have it set up. So everything is now wired into place. I did kind of move the ground a little bit, and I changed how I had the ground set up for the fans. So I got it all kind of nicely connected, and it runs on over and it grounds on the solenoid, which then also grounds to the battery terminal. So it'll work for just quick testing purposes, but obviously wouldn't do that in real life. But that's our setup. We are good to go. I got the alternator also attached here. I think I may have ordered a little bit too long of an alternator cable, but that's going to the positive on the starter solenoid, which then goes to the battery. So I believe that should work. I got to figure out the wiring here, though, for the alternator. I know one of these is going to be an exciter wire, and I believe that's this one is, the red and blue. And then the other one's going to be for like general voltage. Although one thing I have seen also is that this wire is supposed to connect here right to the alternator itself, but that doesn't make any sense to me. And this is supposed to go to a gauge. So I got to figure that out. I guess maybe that'll take some running of the car to be able to kind of throw a voltmeter on there and find out what each of those do. But we'll save that for a later time. So in terms of what's left, got to go ahead and fill up the radiator with coolant. Actually, I think I use water for the initial run-in. And then oil. And then we connect a fuel line. I'm going to run a fuel line just down to a can of gas. Super simple. And then we turn it on and press that button. Starter is now hooked up, so I ain't going to press that anymore because that will then try to turn the engine, and we don't want to do that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get this video wrapped. All right, so that's going to do it. Thank you all for sticking around and waiting for the video. I know it's been a few weeks since I put something out, but I'm still here. I'm still working on it, just slowly but surely, taking my time. But yeah, that's kind of it. So the next video is going to be a big one. I'm going to get this guy started, hopefully, fingers crossed. I still have to hook up the exhaust, but I'm not going to do that on camera because it's really just kind of tossing it all together with a couple of clamps. I do plan on other things though for the exhaust, possibly welding on some flanges and then really connecting it up nicely before I go ahead and actually do anything else with the car. But that's for another video. Anyways, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Click the bell to get those post notifications. And when working on project cars like this, make sure that your paint isn't too thick on your grounding points and don't be that dreaded previous owner. Cheers.